Good morning. Let's open in a word of prayer. Father, we just thank you that you watch over us this morning. Thanks for the time that we get to spend to talk about the things that are going on in the world and how they relate to your prophetic scriptures that you were so gracious to give us thousands of years ago so that we would understand the times in which we live. We just pray that you'll open people's ears and hearts to whatever message you would want to send to them today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I'm going to call this today Panic-Demic. You've heard of epidemics, you've heard of pandemics. Well, this is a Panic-Demic. And I think you'll see as we talk about that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the coronavirus, mainly the response to it. I'm certainly not a prophet. I have... It's been very difficult to figure out what's going on with this. And again, as we talk each week, we talk about this convergence of events that seems to be taking place in the world. And this week, again, I'm not even going to be able to touch on all the topics, but we'll look we're going to spend coronavirus, we're going to look a little bit about some cultural things first, and then we'll talk about Syria, the Middle East, and Israel in that order. The intent of this, what I say today, is not to offend, but if it does, I don't care. I really don't care. I see things going on, and it's just there's a certain insanity. So I'm going to tell you, there are going to be a couple little videos or pictures at the beginning. I've tried to blur them out, but one's an older one, one's a more recent one. I'm more concerned with the reaction of people that are watching this, and you'll see that in just a moment. One of the verses we reference a lot is 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 3, 4, and 5. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. But watch thou in all things, endure afflictions, do the working of evangelists, make full proof of thy ministry. Now I do an interview this week with David Fiorazzo on, I think it's Q90 FM up in Wisconsin, Green Bay. I think it's Green Bay. It's in Wisconsin. I know Milwaukee and Green Bay are in Wisconsin and some other things. There's cheese in Wisconsin. But Stand Up for the Truth, I think that's Thursday at 10 Central Time, 9 Central Time, 10 Eastern Time. It's Thursday morning. I think it starts at 9 Central Time. And that'll be live on the radio. We'll be talking for a little while about some of the things that are going on. I focus a lot on this transgender issue because I think it's sort of a focal point of a lot of things that are going wrong. Now, there is some good news. This was in the news this week that in Ohio, they've actually introduced legislation that would ban transgender athletes, particularly men who claim they are women or boys who claim they are girls, and competing in women's sports. There are lawsuits all over the place that are challenging this. There was a recent lawsuit just filed this week, I can't remember exactly where the mother said, listen, by doing this, you're discriminating against my daughter on the basis of sex, and you're taking away her opportunities to win awards or accolades or participate effectively in the sport. Because in some states where they're allowing this to occur, the boys, and they're still boys, you're never going to change that. I don't care, I feel very sympathetic to the people that struggle with this. But your struggles don't get to harm other people and harm them in a pretty severe way. Aside from the privacy issues, there's just the practical consideration. sometimes it's difficult to tell. This is the week of the Arnold Classic here in Columbus. And sometimes they stay at the hotel attached to the office building that I'm in, and sometimes the women walk by and I feel a little bit tiny. I mean, goodness gracious. I could work out every day for years and never get muscles like that. So I've got to really watch what you say around people in Columbus. But I was on a flight once I had to go to D.C. on a little commuter flight, and it was probably the roughest airline flight I've ever been on. And there were a bunch of these steroidal mutants guys. It was the last day of the Arnold Classic, and we're on this little tiny plane, and these guys, they're each one of them takes up the 2 seats on the side, and they were all quite sick and everything. So it's always an interesting week in Columbus. I used to joke, well, no, I'm not participating this year. I know I look like I am, but I'm giving it up for Lent. Okay, so enough nonsense. But look, this is good news. This type of legislation, there have been some other things, similar type of legislation introduced on this issue in a number of legislatures across the United States. And it's good. But we can always count on California to do the wrong thing. Particularly, there's a legislator out there named Evan Lowe, and you probably heard his name a number of times as I talked about this. And he seems to be always the one who comes up. So now he wants to introduce a bill in California that would require gender-neutral children's areas at stores. In other words, you can't have toys for boys or toys for girls, or boys' clothes or girls' clothes. And again, this is it is demonstrative of the insanity that seems to pass for what people claim is rational thought or caring. Now, a number of years ago, there's no sound on this, but this is a video of this amazing Desmond. And he was on Good Morning America. He's a young boy. And he comes out and he's, this is a boy. But look at the crowd. This is what bothered me most about it, was look at the reaction of the crowd. And as I looked through this a number of times, I only ever saw one person that was sitting there not doing anything. And then they had these drag queens interview Desmond. And there was a whole audience of people who looked like normal people that were cheering and clapping and laughing about this. And when you bring this up, people often say, oh, you're just a Jeremiah. I can't believe, you're a bummer. But Jeremiah was right, wasn't he? And at some point, you've got to say, stop it. This is nonsense. It's beyond anything else. It's child abuse. Now, this is a picture of a man who dressed somehow, who did a very seductive dance for this little 5-year-old girl. Okay? And I blurred out part of it so you can't see how he was dressed. But look at all the people in the background. This took place in Poland. And the mother, she's over here on the left, she's encouraging and dancing along. And I see this and I'm like, it bothers me. And I always cite the verse in Luke chapter 19 or in 2 Peter 2 where, he says that Lot, when Lot saw the stuff going on in Sodom, he was vexed in his soul about this. And I will say again and again, if this stuff doesn't bother you, you really need to check your heart and your relationship with the Lord. Because this is perverse. Now, here's some more good news. This is an article today in today's Times of London. The National Health Service in the UK is now being taken to court over the treatment of a young lady. She's now 23. She went to a gender clinic. She was having gender dysphoria. And she was told on her second visit, they scheduled her to have her breasts removed. Second visit. And now these are healthcare professionals. These are people who've been through a lot of schooling. And supposedly they're only schooled in the sciences, right? It's very troubling. A woman who claims she was steered into taking puberty-blocking drugs at 16 has won the right to take her case to trial. A landmark case to stop the NHS prescribing experimental puberty blockers. I don't know why they put experimental in scare quotes, but they are experimental puberty blockers to children who say they want to change their gender, is to go ahead after judges gave it the green light last week. So there have been a number of really encouraging court decisions, both here in the United States and in the UK. One of the High Court's most senior judges, Mr. Justice Supperstone, said it was plainly arguable that Britain's first NHS child gender clinic was acting unlawfully when it referred children to receive powerful drugs to arrest puberty. He has given permission for a full trial in the divisional court before the end of July. The case against Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust, which runs a gender identity clinic in London, is being led by Kira Bell, whose gender reassignment treatment began at the clinic when she was only 16. Yesterday, Bell, now 23, said she was very excited at the ruling and hoped the case would bring attention to the fact that children are being given experimental drug treatments that could have lifelong consequences. Bell was depressed as a teenager and asked to be called by a boy's name at her school. Her GP doctor referred her to the gender identity clinic. From then on, everything snowballed, she said. I was 16 when I had my first appointment. After a handful of appointments, I was taking puberty-blocking drugs. Bell, who has stopped transitioning, is waiting to see whether the powerful drugs from a young age has impaired her fertility. By the time I was 18, I was on cross-sex hormones. It was so quick. Then I got transferred to the adult gender identity service. After 2 appointments, she was referred for chest surgery to remove her breast. From then on, I was on my own. They did not keep tabs on me. I had no therapy. I was just living the way I thought was best. According to legal documents, the clinic started prescribing puberty-blocking drugs to children as young as 11 or 12 from about 2014 on, and is still doing so. Nearly all children given puberty blockers go on to take cross-sex hormones. The most common drug used as a puberty blocker is triptorelin, which is licensed to treat advanced prostate cancer in men, to chemically castrate male sex offenders, and to halt very early puberty. In England, in 2009 and 10 in England, 40 girls under 18 were referred for gender treatment. By 2017, the number stood at 1,806. 40 to 1,806 in less than a decade. Referrals. The clinic said, we welcome the opportunity to talk about the service and to stand up for our dedicated staff who put the best interests of the young people and families at the hearts of their practices. Oh, here's the last sentence. The NHS, National Health Service, is carrying out a review into the use of puberty blockers. I guess maybe we ought to get back around to looking into this. This is what happens. This is a very good picture of Romans chapter 1 in operation. And God says, I'm going to give you up to a reprobate mind. And you will lose the ability to reason. And the news is filled with this stuff week after week after week. Give me 1 second here. I need to add in I just edited a video, so I don't even know if it's going to work, which is typical, you know. So Give me 1 second here. Okay. And this is another sort of, we talk about pestilence and that sort of thing. And here we are. This is locusts in Saudi Arabia. And they're going through fields, and they'll take out a farm field, in 30 seconds. And these are spreading across Africa and the Middle East. Sky literally goes black at times. Now, people are actually investigating whether they should. Maybe we could catch them and eat them. So they're testing to see whether the chemicals they spray on them to kill them would have an impact on people who decide to eat them later. So I'll stick with, well, I don't know what I'll stick with, but so listen, so when I see these things, I don't want you to think that I'm saying, okay, this is what the Bible prophesied. But this is certainly a picture of what the Bible prophesies will happen in the end times on a very intense level. And it's the same thing with the coronavirus. Here's a map of the best places to get the coronavirus. The yellow are the best prepared. According to this chart, and I can't remember the organization that put this together, the U.S. is the best. And now there's concerns that it's spreading into Africa, which are woefully unprepared to deal with the coronavirus. There are a lot of theories about that thing, about the coronavirus. Where did it come from? Was it engineered? Is it intentional? Was it unintentional? Is it just natural? And so whatever opinion you want to have on that, you can find people to back you up. As I've studied it and looked at it and talked to people about it, I think that people say, well, it only has a death rate in some places of 2%. So I don't know that I want to get a cold that has a, 1 in 50 chance of killing me. I think that's a big deal. But, as I've often said, the death rate from all causes among human beings is about 100%. So something's going to get us, but I guess this is just another one of the ones that might get us. But it is a problem. It is spreading. It has had a tremendous impact on the economy. Virus fears bruise world stocks. That was the thing on Tuesday. They're talking about testing experimental vaccines. Some people say that Israel already has developed a coronavirus vaccine that they may have to adapt, but it'll take a while to get it through trial so it would be approved. Whether it's going to be effective or not, with this, nobody knows. It appears that the people that are more likely to die from it are older people. The death rate seems to be much higher among people above 70 than younger people, but I still see these videos. I saw a video this morning of a child who had it in Iran standing on the street and just collapsing on the street from the effects of the virus. By Friday, the stocks were down. It was into a bear territory. Corrections, the U.S. Treasury bond interest rate hit the lowest rate ever in history. Stocks fell 13% over the course of a week from a record high. So, and as one article here says on the right, mild symptoms fuel fast epidemic. So, there is a bit of panic going on. I'm sure you've seen the pictures that are going around of empty shelves. This is supposedly a store in Germany. I saw pictures of Costco's on Long Island and other places where before they opened, there were hundreds of people in the parking lot lined up with their baskets. And Some Costco's have been, I don't know how else to say it, they've been wiped out of their supplies of toilet paper. And this is, think about it. The Olympics are supposed to be in Tokyo, and Tokyo, the Olympic officials are sort of starting to suggest that maybe the Olympics will not take place. In one of the Gulf states, and I think in the United Arab Emirates, there was a bike competition, and one or two of the people came down with it, so the World Championship competition was canceled. So this is, it's having a huge impact. Look at some of these statistics. As of Friday, a $3.6 trillion collapse in the U.S. stock market. Worldwide, it's been somewhere between $6 and $8 trillion. It has, here's some of the impact on the actual values. Amazon is down 142 billion in value, Microsoft 221 billion, Apple 219 billion, Visa 72 billion. Not sure it's Facebook, but it's down quite a bit. It's down like about 25%. Alphabet down 144 billion. So some, JP Morgan Chase is down 58 billion. It's had a big impact. Now there have been about 5 or 6 stocks, mainly science and medical services related, that actually went up. 7 stocks rose in value, 493 lost. Norwegian Cruise Line down 33%. I think there's going to be some bankruptcies in the cruise industry. $25% drop in container volumes in February at the Port of Los Angeles. The percentage of Apple's revenue there in the center, 15%, is derived from China. More than 200,000 flights to and from and within China have been canceled by airlines. 92% is the decline in car sales from 1 month over month in China. 92%. In the lower right-hand corner, 85% is the percentage of the world's toys that are made in China. Toy companies are struggling to fill retail orders as the epidemic disrupts the industry's supply chains. Over in the left-hand corner, 17,600 is the number of different Procter & Gamble products, headquartered down in Cincinnati, that rely on materials from China. There's a lot of little different jokes you could make about this. 9.4% decline in air travel. People I've talked to have traveled quite a bit. They said the airports are pretty empty, even here in the United States. Some of you might remember I was traveling, probably the heaviest travel portion of my legal career was right after 9/11, right around 9/11. And I remember flying like Columbus to Dallas, Columbus to Philadelphia, Boston on a 737 with me and 2 other people, which is kind of freaky, you know. You have all those empty seats and they all creak. It's like ghost plane. I flew from Ontario to Sacramento, California one night with me and 1 other person on a flight. So it's happening. Oil is down. The 38% Zoom video has gone up because people are scheduling more online meetings. Under Armour sales are down $50 to $60 million. So we could go on and on and on about this. Estimated $1 trillion potential loss in global output resulting from an extended shutdown of Chinese manufacturing, exports, and consumption. Coal consumption down 40% at major Chinese power companies. 60 days are the polyester stockpiles in China that have doubled from a norm of 90 days. So anyway, this is just incredible. Somebody sent me this that watches online. This is an email notice that went around to people that work at the University of California at Davis Medical Center, where they had a person who came in with coronavirus symptoms. It was 4 days before the person was tested for coronavirus. The California Department of Health and Sacramento County did not have any testing kits available. And it took 4 days before the CDC released one. So all of this is very troubling. We really don't know what's going to happen. It could burn itself out like a lot of viruses do, but it could also come back in another form and be more, their reinfections are very, very serious matters. The death rate is much higher if you get reinfected with it after having been infected with it once. I'll talk a little bit about some of the other countries it's going through. The Psalms are always good to read, to give you some comfort. Psalm 91, he that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God. In him will I trust. Surely he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid of the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Now some of these are prophecies concerning the coming Messiah. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample under feet. Because he hath set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. So we can rest in the comfort that listen, God has us in the palm of his hands. That doesn't mean that we're not going to suffer. It doesn't mean that absent a rapture that we're not going to die. But we do have the comfort, whether we know, one of the things we don't know is we don't know our exit date from life. And we're supposed to live like we could meet the Lord at any moment. Over the past week, I've had 2 friends die. One was shot in the chest, Phil Haney out in California. Another one had a heart attack on Wednesday. He was on his way to work. And Thursday he passed away. This is what happens. This is part of life. And Christians always need to live their life in light of the fact that they could meet the Lord at any moment, regardless of how that is, death or rapture or whatever. Well, I guess there are really only 2 options there. But you should always be ready to meet the Lord. It ought to motivate you to holy living. So countries have responded to this in a number of ways. The Saudis have, in cooperation with the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, have said, we're not allowing foreigners to come on pilgrimages to Mecca and Medina. Now you can say, well, everything is overblown, people are panicking. And I think we're sort of at the stage where nobody knows exactly for certain how this is going to work out, what's going to happen. So people are trying to take reasonable steps to prevent it. I've heard that Israel has been considering barring foreigners, non-Israelis, from entering the country. This has a huge impact on tourism. Saudi Arabia, they have millions of people come to do pilgrimages to the holy cities of Mecca and Medina each year. This will have a huge impact. In fact, in that article, it says that they're expecting a 40% decline in the hotel industry. 40% decline in bookings in the hotel industry in Saudi Arabia for the near term. It could even be higher than that. It's also affected people, and Iran has been particularly affected. This was the little video at the top here was a news conference that one of the directors of health in Iran was putting on to tell people we've got this under control, we're taking steps and measures. And you see the deputy director there doing what? He's mopping his face. And this goes on for many minutes. I mean, the guy's, it's kind of uncomfortable to watch, and it was announced later that he actually has the coronavirus. There was a member of parliament in Iran that died. There are a number of people in the leadership that have been found to have the coronavirus. So I don't know exactly what's happened. I saw Ayatollah Khamenei doing a video, and he had this like big square box under his robe. I'm not sure what that was. He's been in bad health for a long time. But you know, this is the thing that you have to think about is there's some concerns about the Pope. He was seen mopping his brow in an audience last week. It's announced that he's sick. I've seen reports. Somebody sent me a report that he has been diagnosed. I do not know if that is true, so don't say that I said that he has. I've not been able to verify it. I always try to verify these things through 2 or 3 sources. It's because sometimes, you know, there's people who use this for propaganda and that type of thing. So I don't know if the Pope he is ill. He's elderly. He also had part of a lung removed back when he was a teenager, I think, because of an illness. So he's already in a state where he would be compromised. And Italy, you know, I saw pictures of Milan, in the shopping district of Milan, Italy, and it's a ghost town. There's nobody out shopping. So people are sort of panicking. You know, I think it would be wise for people to you're sort of at the point where you're not going to be able to make any reasonable preparations. Buy a few extra supplies if you can find them. I don't know that masks help that much. It's kind of interesting, the CDC put out a thing like, stop buying these masks because we can't get them for our doctors. Well, wait a minute. And they said they don't work. Well, then why do the doctors have them? So I don't know. Like I said, I've seen, you need to understand what my week looks like. I get sent massive numbers of videos, reports, articles, and that type of thing. So I try to take a high view of it. I've read a lot. I've listened to some videos by some very intelligent people. Some say it's a huge problem. Some say it's nothing. It's sort of like having the cold. But I think it's a little bit more serious than that. And how much it's going to do, we don't know. But it is in the United States. They've had a person die in Washington, the state of Washington. So I know Benjamin Netanyahu and the campaign trail is not shaking hands now. I think that's a reasonable thing. I saw a video with someone. I would sort of reenact it here, but I'm afraid it would kind of go viral in the wrong way. But they come up and they bow, and then they kind of kick opposite feet and everything. So. Nobody shaking hands. That was filmed somewhere in the Middle East. Yeah, that video has gone viral. So I don't know. So now what I want to do is I want to turn to, I'm sure I was totally unclear on what's going to happen with this. The one thing, though, I think you should take away from this is we know that these type of things are prophesied to come on the world in the end times. And when they come, you're getting these previews of everything. You're getting previews of earthquakes, you're getting previews of floods and storms and wildfires and pestilence and locusts and all of these things. And so it should help prepare people for these things, but understand, I think, what's coming, I know that what's coming will be far worse. But I do think that, in a way, God is warning the world. Pay attention, folks. Pay attention. And decide where your refuge really lies. It's not, your refuge should not be having, 50 dozen rolls of toilet paper or something like that. But you understand, you should take reasonable precautions. And this has happened before. I remember when I was in high school, there was they said there was going to be a toilet paper shortage, and it seemed like half the basement was full of toilet paper. So, and I didn't buy it. So, anyway, let's talk a little bit about Syria, because Syria is kind of a critical, important issue. Early in the week, Erdogan, let me see if I can find my map here. This will kind of tell you a little bit about what's going on. This is from southfront.org. Now, the fact that I use Southfront a little bit does not mean that I agree with everything that Southfront puts up. They are a pro-Syrian regime website. But they do a very good job of putting up things to let us kind of know what's going on. So Turkey drove out Kurds from this area around Idlib. What the Syrian government did, though, was in southwestern Syria around Dara, when they defeated some of the rebel groups down there, they gave them the option: you can stay here and we will hunt you down and kill you, or we will put you on a bus. And they put them on a bus and they moved them to Idlib. So now they have a lot of rebel groups. And I think I said at the time, when I showed videos of them putting these people on buses, is that eventually they're going to have to deal with the problem in Idlib. Now, so they send them up there, so Turkey wants to take over that region, that wants to control that region, in part because that wants to control the border because they're tired of having a lot of people come into Turkey that are totally destitute. Turkey has 3.8 million refugees before all of this started. That's out of a population of about 80 million people. So about 1 out of every 20 people in Turkey is a refugee. That has a tremendous, and they've come with nothing. In many cases, just the clothes on their back. They are kept in the border areas and tent cities. You'll see some of that in a moment, but they're also straining services in Istanbul. And Erdogan is threatened. He wants a certain number of billion euros per year from the EU. And if you don't give that to me, I'm going to open the borders and I'm going to let these people flood into Europe again, and you can deal with the problem. The refugee problem from Syria has also caused massive problems in Jordan and Lebanon, where about a quarter of the population in both of those countries is now Syrian refugees. Syria had 21 million people before the war. They're now down to 10. All those other people went somewhere. About 60% of the country no longer lives where they did in 2011. Just try to transfer those numbers over to the United States, where we have several hundred million people, and say that we would have 180 million people that would have moved in the last decade, with taking nothing with them. So up in Idlib, in northwestern Syria, the green area, the darker green area, is area controlled by Turkey and its rebels that it backs. These are very often terrorist groups that would be affiliated with Al-Qaeda and other known terrorist groups. Turkey is using them. Partly they used them because they wanted to drive the Kurds out of there. And then they moved their desire to move the Kurds out even to the east along that border when they said they wanted the safe zone. So over the past couple of weeks, the Syrian regime, that controls the area that's red. The purple area at the bottom, that's the territory that the Syrian regime has recaptured from Turkish control over the last couple of weeks. The bright green area is the area that Turkey has taken back from the Syrian regime. So there has been this back and forth. Erdogan announced, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to take care of it. Now this is a problem because Erdogan is part of the Astana Accords and the Sochi Accords entered into with Russia and Iran about managing the problem in Syria. So the problem with Erdogan and Turkey going too much after the regime is eventually they're going to bump heads with the Russians and possibly the Iranians. Although Iran is sort of distracted right now with some things going on. They lost their key general. They have people in the government that are ill. They have elderly. The mullahs are all aging. And there are even talk about some people in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard doing a coup and taking over the government. Now, that won't change anything. Okay, it may be worse. And so it's a very, I will say, it is a very, very complex situation. So Turkey wants, they just want a status quo, and Russia is allowing the Syrian regime to move up into Idlib to take back parts of Idlib. So Turkey said, listen, we're going to do something that's just, we're just going to do that. That led to a confrontation this week, and in that confrontation, 33, now 34 Turkish soldiers were killed. Now, nobody is really taking credit for having killed them. Some people say, well, it was the Syrians, but then the operation took place at night, and the Syrian Air Force is not really known for being able to operate at night. But Russia is saying, well, we didn't do it. Well, it just didn't happen. You know, these things bombs just didn't fall out of the air and hit these people and kill them. That led to, here's a video of the funeral that took place, some of the funerals taking place in Turkey. You see here the Turkish newspapers, they have pictures of all of the soldiers that were killed, memorials to them, every place that they're from, as you would expect. This was an interesting in Daily Sabah, which is a Turkish, or a Erdogan mouthpiece. I love looking at these editorial cartoons because they often carry a huge message behind them. So here is the eye of Erdogan crying over the Turkish soldiers, but he's not crying tears, he's crying bombs. It's a very, you really, and this is one of his main mouthpieces. There's one that's probably a little bit more controlled by Erdogan. So here's another map that shows what happens. The Assad regime killed 33 soldiers in a town there near Baluan, the red one there in the square. So that happened on Thursday night. Erdogan went in over the last day and they engaged. Here's some video from drone footage. Turkey has fairly advanced drones. It seems like everybody has fairly advanced drones. You get great video. And one shot from these drones, these are pretty powerful missiles that they take people out with. And there's a number of these. I'll let this play for a minute or so. You'll see one guy here who seems to be an incredibly lucky guy. But now you'll see this one guy running away. And so it's sort of like that guy. And here's another video. They're not, they almost look like a video game in some respects. And the word is, at least that from reports that I've been able to gather, is that Turkey took out somewhere around 700 Syrian regime forces. This is a big deal for Syria because Syria's been fighting this, their army and stuff has been fighting this war for almost 9 years. Their people are tired, they're fatigued. Imagine being in a war situation for 9 years. I mean, we rotate our troops in, we try to keep them only there for a year. It's even a problem for us because we've had to extend things over for the war in Afghanistan, which is supposedly over. So Turkey took out all of these targets, and it's pretty sure you always have to kind of look at the subtext of videos that you see. So here's a video that appeared on the right, a video that it is a funeral that's taking place at one of the big mosques in Damascus. Now look, parts of Damascus are completely destroyed, but parts of it are relatively normal. But if you look closely at the coffins that they're carrying, what flag do they have on the coffins? That's the flag of Hezbollah. So what we've learned from that is that in this area of Idlib is that Hezbollah units, militia members, are on the ground being sponsored by Iran in the Idlib region, and they're being used by the Syrian government. So that shows that Erdogan took out some Iranian-backed fighters. That brings Iran into the mix. That makes it even more complicated. It's also reported, you can't read if you don't read Turkish, you can't understand the top part. There's a great thing out there called Translate, Google Translate, translate.google.com, and you can copy that and put it in there, and you can get an idea what these people are talking about. But what they found is that there are pictures of 3 gentlemen there. Those are 3 Syrian generals, top generals, that were killed in the Turkish operations, the video of which I just played you. So this is all a very complicated situation, to say the least. Erdogan came out and spoke, and by the way, here at the at this thing, if you look, see the empty chair there that's facing the other way, or somebody looks like they're sitting down in it, and then 2 people to the right, that's Erdogan's son-in-law, by the way, and he made some comment in his talk about that, about his son-in-law, kind of a little bit of a joke, I guess. But here's Erdogan essentially said, listen, we're going to, what did we tell you? We told Europe, if you don't help us, we're going to open the gates. And he says, Europe, they didn't believe what they said. This is a talk to his top echelon. And what did he do? We opened the gates. And so now you have these videos. This is along the Turkey-Greece border. And you see this just happened in like 3 days. I saw videos of Syrian refugees getting on buses in Istanbul. And I mean dozens of buses and people fighting to get on and crowds standing. But the other thing that was kind of interesting is, just like the last immigration thing that took place a number of years ago, they looked like they were all military-aged men. Amazing how that happens. Now, there are some women, you do see some women in some of these videos, but they're largely men. Here are pictures this is a drone footage taken along the area near the border with Greece. And you see people just, see what they're taking with them? They're walking to get away from the situation. And look, the situation is horrific. Here's a crowd of people along the Turkish-Greek border just this morning. Excuse me, yesterday morning. They have, there's a Turkish border thing there, and they're essentially stuck in no man's land between the border checkpoints. This is the Greek soldiers are shooting tear gas to disperse the crowds. They're lighting fires. There's protests. Now, listen, this has only been a couple days, a day or so. What happens when all these people need to eat? It's a horrible situation. It led to a meeting at the UN Security Council on Thursday in New York, and here is the Assistant Secretary General of the UN giving this, I guess I would call her this week's guest prophecy updater with what she has to talk about.
What is happening in northwest Syria, they said, is beyond imagination. It is not humanly tolerable. They told me of children so traumatized they no longer speak. One of the women who works as a midwife in Idlib city told me she can see how the intensely stressful situation is impacting her patients. Early deliveries, miscarriages, and low-weight births are on the rise. Pregnant women are asking her for cesarean deliveries out of fear of going into labor while on the move and without medical care. Our latest data available indicate that almost 950,000 people have fled the advancing front lines in the northwest since December the 1st. Most have moved into the northwest of Idlib Governorate, a small area along Syria's border with Turkey that already hosts hundreds of thousands of displaced people. Many of these exhausted families have moved over and over and over again, all amid freezing conditions. The women from Idlib described to me the day-to-day reality of living in this overcrowded environment. One has found shelter in a basement with 15 other adults and 20 children. There is no privacy. Some women told me they could not change their clothes for weeks. Violence against women, they said, has become routine.
And so the UN Security Council considered a couple of resolutions. Here's some other pictures of some videos of just some streets in the Idlib governorate, the area around Idlib. It is it's hard for us to get our heads around this. Now, listen, 9 years ago, this was a fairly thriving area. I mean, it certainly wasn't rich or anything like that, but it certainly wasn't like this. And now everybody's on the move. Here's another drone video. I think this is some of the things that you saw earlier. Just the devastation. And then in the Turkish border area, these pictures this morning in, I think it was in one of the Arab newspapers, the Arab newspaper that's published in London, had these pictures of the Turkish-Greece border area. Estimates of somewhere between 37 and 80,000 people have already been on the move. It's said, this is probably the biggest thing. Now listen, this immigration thing, there are a lot of little things, and I think a lot of these play into the different scenarios that are laid out in Bible prophecy. For example, I've talked about the demographic problems. This is an article from September 4th, 2019 in the Jerusalem Post on the left. Hezbollah's demographic problem explains its restraint. Hezbollah has been engaged in a war on behalf of Syria now for 9 years. What's happened, though, in this country is that while they have maintained Islamic values, their birth patterns have been westernized. They're having fewer births. When they have fewer births, they may have only 2 children, one male, one female. They are increasingly reluctant to give up their male son to go fight in a war on behalf of Iran or Syria. And so Hezbollah is sort of at a lot of pressure on them. Listen to what this article says. What this all means is the Hezbollah's recruitment pool is strictly limited to the Shiite community in Lebanon, and there is the rub. Not only is the Shiite community relatively small, between 1 million to 1.5 million souls, it is suffering from a rapidly declining birth rate, very much similar to the declining fertility rate in Iran, where the birth rates, because of economic and loss of hope and that sort of thing, are collapsing as fast as anywhere else in the world. Part of that is due to the aging of the population. Remember, back from 81 to 89, there was the Iran-Iraq war, and somewhere on the order of 500,000 young men died in that war from Iran, a similar number from Iraq. Well, you don't replace them. And so now we're out, what are we out, 35, 40 years or so from that? And that has had a huge impact on the demographics in Iran. And this is one of the things I look at, is that I think the Iranian leadership, whether it's the Iranian Revolutionary Guard or the mullahs, they want to take care of the Israel-Jewish problem. They want to get rid of Israel, and they see an increasingly narrowing window. It's one of those things where I think it sort of heightens my view that we live in the end times because of the pressure of all these demographic collapses that are taking place, of which Hezbollah is just one. It says this: the declining Syria birth rate from 5 to 6 children per woman of childbearing age in the 1980s to less than 2.05 that is needed to maintain the existing population 25 years later has many implications. By far, the most important restraint for Hezbollah is that small families are reluctant to sacrifice what is all too often their only son in a society where the two-child family becomes the norm. Now, looking back at that, and then looking again at the article that I cited last week by Jonathan Spire in last Friday's, a week ago, Friday Jerusalem Post, where he talks about Syria's wild southwest, you can see that what Iraq has done is they have used their influence, religious and money and that type of thing, to create influence throughout the Middle East region as they try to build their sphere of influence. And they're using other people because they don't have them to spare. That's why they're using proxies. Now, Turkey still has a pretty good birth rate, but they use proxies too. They're using Syrian fighters. They're taking some of those Syrian fighters and importing them or exporting them to Libya to fight there, where they're also entering into clashes that are putting them at odds with Russia. I don't know how all of this plays out, but the use of immigration has long been recognized among U.S. military intelligence and that sort of thing as a weapon that's used. I'm going to play you a clip of General Breedlove, who at the time was the head of NATO. Now, Turkey's saying, oh, look, we're being attacked. NATO, you have to come help us. Now, I don't know that the NATO charter really applies to that, but that's what Erdogan is saying, which you would expect him to say. But this is General Breedlove testifying in late, sometime around 2015, 2016, in front of one of the House committees about what Russia and Turkey are doing.
To the south, from the Levant through North Africa, Europe faces a complicated mix of mass migration spurred by state instability and state collapse, and masking the movement of criminals, terrorists, and foreign fighters. Within this mix, ISIL, or Daesh as I call them, is spreading like a cancer, taking advantage of paths of least resistance, threatening European nations and our own with terrorist attacks. Its brutality is driving millions to flee from Syria and Iraq, creating an almost unprecedented humanitarian challenge. Russia's entry into the fight in Syria has wildly exacerbated the problem, changing the dynamic in the air and on the ground. Despite public pronounces to the contrary, Russia has done little to counter Daesh, but a great deal to bolster the Assad regime and its allies. And together, Russia and the Assad regime are deliberately weaponizing migration from Syria in an attempt to overwhelm European structures and break European resolve. Again, I look at what I see in capabilities and capacities, and then I determine intent. So what I have seen in Syria, in places like Aleppo and others, are what I would call absolutely indiscriminate, unprecise bombing, rubblizing major portions of a city that do not appear to me to be against any specific military target, because the weapons they're using have no capability of hitting specific targets. They are unguided, dumb weapons. And what I have seen in the Assad regime from the beginning, when they started using barrel bombs, which have absolutely no military utility, they are unguided and crude, and what are they designed to do is terrorize the public and get them on the road. Later, Assad using chlorine gas and other chemical-type approaches to these same barrel bombs. Again, almost zero military utility, designed to get people on the road and make them someone else's problem. Get them on the road, make them a problem for Europe to bend Europe to the will of where they want them to be.
And this was an article from late 2015 in Foreign Policy, Putin's Muslim Nightmare. There were a series of articles in Foreign Policy about this. And 20% at the time, that was 5 years ago, 20% of Russia was Muslim. It's higher, 25% I've read in Moscow back in 2015. And so Putin's concerned about this. He's had big problems down in the Caucasus region in southern Russia. And the article says this: for this reason, this Muslim issue poses an existential challenge from which there is no escape, a dilemma rooted in Russian demography and history. Most of Russia's Sunni Muslims live in the northern Caucasus, historically the scene of anti-Russian Islamist upheavals. Chechnya was not long ago, the scene not long ago of two bloody wars pitting Muslims against Slavs. Neighboring Tajikistan is another powder keg, part of the jihadist self-proclaimed caliphate of the Caucasus. Clerics there deliver sermons considered sympathetic to the goals of the Islamic State. And so what happened in Syria was they essentially got the Sunni Muslims, they wanted to drive them out. It would help Iran, it would help the Assad regime. And I don't know, I've never seen Assad complaining that half the population of my country that I rule, or sort of rule, or pretend that I rule, is gone. I've never seen him really complain about that. He's trying to protect what little power base he still has left. So this is a big issue that kind of, and we're seeing this kind of pop back up again. It happened back in 2015 and 2016 with the migration into Europe. So when we have this, so we look at these issues, so, we always talk about this is Ezekiel 38 and 39. I think we see things forming, but we can see that the Russian alliance with Turkey is kind of falling apart. Turkey and Iran are at odds. So what happens? Is there something that happens? Does Russia leave? Does Turkey attack Iran? Well, we've already seen that they're taking out Hezbollah fighters. They have no compunction about doing that. So I'm just saying, and that's also happening, Lebanon, south of the Lebanon, there is where the Golan Heights is, where I think this Ezekiel 38 war will take place. But they're all the way up there by Aleppo, almost up there in the corner of the Mediterranean, where Turkey and the Mediterranean and Syria all come together. So this is one of the issues. Now let me just talk a couple issues. I have no answer for how this is going to play out. I'm just saying I think it's worth watching. I do think some of the things that I see with the fractures in the alliance might actually fit into Bible prophecy. I'm going to do Sunday morning here in a few weeks, I think the last Sunday of the month. And I may talk about that, but I may also talk about some of the other things. I keep getting these emails and phone calls about people in churches, schools, universities, whatever, that are dealing with this Enneagram thing that keeps creeping in. I got one this week, spent a couple hours on the phone with someone. And it's everywhere. And it's not Christian. When you look back at how the Enneagram started, a big proponent of it is Richard Rohr, who has this Center for Contemplation, Action and Contemplation out in Albuquerque. And by the way, they're having a conference in a couple weeks. Guess who's speaking at the conference in addition to Richard Rohr? Good old Brian McLaren is back. So I may talk about that on Sunday morning in 4 weeks. So I'm still working through that. Here's another thing. We've talked about this, the water problems. This is from the Arab News this morning. Trouble on Tap, and it's looking at the problems that they have with water issues, the dams that Turkey has built and that Ethiopia is building, and how the Turkish dam, which is, I think, about 18 miles north of the Syria-Turkey border, but it's in that little narrow strip of Syria that quickly turns into Iraq. And all the way in southern Iraq, people are upset about this and what this is going to do to their livelihoods. I've played you videos about that. And then, of course, we have the Renaissance Dam, about a $4 or $5 billion dam that Turkey or that Ethiopia is bringing online, and that may have an impact on the water in the Nile Valley. Let me just read to you a couple passages, though, that I think are prophecies that are yet to be fulfilled, one from Isaiah 19 and the other from Ezekiel 29, about what does it say? Now, we know in Revelation it says what? The Euphrates dries up, right? Turkey can do that right now if they wanted to shut off the water. And I think they're cutting back on the flow of the Euphrates is what originally exacerbated the drought in Syria back in around 2008 to 2010. That led to a lot of internal disruption. So people like Erdogan use every weapon at their disposal. But here's what Isaiah 19 says, "And the Egyptians will I give over to the hand of a cruel Lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, saith the Lord of hosts. And the waters shall fail from the sea, and the river shall be wasted and dried up." Now listen, if you look at a nighttime picture of Egypt, there's lights along the Nile and nowhere else. I think 98% of the people live along the Nile. If that water goes away, there's a problem. And in Ezekiel chapter 29, there's also this prophecy, "And the land of Egypt shall be desolate and waste, and they shall know that I am the Lord, because he has said, the river is mine, and I have made it. Behold, therefore, I am against thee and against thy rivers, and I will make the land of Egypt utterly waste and desolate from the tower of Syene, even unto the border of Ethiopia." And that tower of Syene, many people, I've studied a little bit, my conclusion is that it could very well be the Aswan High Dam that was built back in the 60s by Nasser in Russia. And something might happen to that. But it says from there to the border of Ethiopia, there's going to be a big problem sometime. So let's go to Israel. Now, one of the things that happened here is Israel got together with people, David Friedman and others, to map out the Trump plan. I think there's a little comment from Netanyahu here.
Do is you have to delineate this line, which is not such an easy thing to do. They have to finish delineating. If we do it in pieces, it's one thing. If you do it complete, then you have to delineate all the problems.
Well, and that's kind of interesting. So essentially what they're saying is, you're going to do it a little piece by piece. You're going to do it all at once. You have to get down. Essentially, he's saying you got to get down to the house level. And so there are people that are working on this map of Judea and Samaria and the division according to the Trump plan. Let's see. I'm going to stop with a clip of Caroline Glick, but we also have she has a good article on Israel Hayom. You can get the English language version of that. I won't take time to read it. But she's talking about, we're at a very, sort of at a critical juncture, she says. I'll paraphrase it. What happens if a Bernie Sanders gets elected as president of the United States? What happens to Israel? And I must confess I don't think about that. I think what happens to America if somebody like that. I should have brought the editorial cartoon. There's a picture. Remember the famous Norman Rockwell painting where he's painting and he's sort of looking at somebody like himself? So there's Bernie looking at Bernie painting, and what's appearing on the canvas is Fidel Castro. I'll have to find that. Great interest. And the election in Israel's tomorrow. This is a poll from a couple days ago. The Likud coalition looks like it's up to 57, maybe 58, maybe even 59, but they need 61. Blue and white has dropped down a little bit. Lieberman's party has dropped down a little bit. So a lot of it will depend on the turnout tomorrow. I have no idea what's going to happen. Here's Caroline Glick. She's talking about sort of the importance of someone who grew up in Chicago and then immigrated to Israel, speaking at CPAC on Friday.
Well, thanks so much, Governor. You know, it's funny, Yishai and I both live in the same town of Efrat, which is where King David is from. So it's true that, you know, when my children learned the story of Ruth, the Moabite, who came to Israel, and she was David's great-grandmother, they're right in their neighborhood. This is where it happened. And this is really what we're talking about when we're talking about Jews coming back and rebuilding the Jewish Commonwealth after 2,000 years of exile. So when you're talking about Judea and Samaria, you really are talking about our birthright. This is what has maintained the Jewish people throughout so many generations, 50 generations of being chased from country to country and barely surviving. So I think it's really extraordinary, Israel today, what our children have the ability to experience. It's something that Jews really just haven't had that capacity for 2,000 years, so it's extraordinary. And you know, regarding that, also when I was in the Army, I was a member of the Israeli negotiating team with the Palestinians. We were doing all of this craziness, trying to figure out a way to share a land with a terrorist organization that wants to take everything that we've accomplished and destroy it. So it was sort of a very, you know, I learned a lot professionally during this period, but it was also very stressful because the people we were meeting with were actually going out and planning terrorist attacks right after they left the negotiating room. So they were sitting, they were breaking bread with us, they were our good friends and sparring partners in negotiating deals, and then they were breaching them. So, you know, that's very important. One of the things that the negotiations ignored were Israel's rights, because how can you base negotiations with a terrorist organization that wants to annihilate you on rights? If you do that, then they won't talk to you. So Israel put our rights on the side, and I think it's very important when we talk about the map of Israel to go back to those. Because next month we're going to be celebrating the Centennial of the San Remo Convention, which was the convention that the Allied powers after World War I had, where they were dividing up Turkey's colonial possessions in the Ottoman Empire. And one of the main areas was the mandate for the land of Israel, the mandate of Palestine. And under international law, when a colonial territory gains independence, the borders of the independent state are the borders of the mandate, of the colony. And so this is called uti possidetis juris. And that's the legal norm. So the minute that Israel's borders were determined in 1920 in the San Remo Convention, what we had in 1948 was a country that was supposed to have those borders. Those borders include Judea and Samaria. So we know that those are the lawful borders of Israel. It's just that, and we never gave them up. And we never revoked our legitimate rights to our borders under international law. So I think when we're talking about the map of Israel, we have to start with that map. Now, one of the main things that's so important about the Trump plan and about the Trump presidency, really, is that he's decided that American Middle East policy has to be based on reality and not on propaganda. Because for the past, exactly, last round of applause for President Trump. We love Trump. I love Trump. Because it's so important, you know, for all of these years we've been saying, look, you have to look at the reality on the ground. You have to see what's going on here. And so the Trump plan says, at the outset, Israel has these rights. Israel is not an occupier. What Secretary Pompeo said that was so important was that he threw out that insanity and really that evil declaration that the Obama administration put out that they supported in the UN Security Council, that Israel has no rights to areas that are legitimate, that are ours under international law. So we are an illegal occupier. It was such a hateful message and so wrong. And it was about empowering America's enemies and harming America's chief ally in the Middle East because, in a way, it delegitimizes American power in the Middle East. If America's closest ally in the Middle East is illegitimate, what does that say about the United States? And so President Trump said, that is nonsense, right? And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said, the Israeli communities in Judea and Samaria are absolutely lawful under international law, and we're basing American policy on that. That's the revolution that Trump has brought to the Middle East, that American policy is about reality. And so here I just want to say they're having a mapping committee now, and they're trying to figure out what Israel should do. And the concept is that Trump wants to reserve areas in Judea and Samaria for a future Palestinian state. They have 4 years to figure out if they want one or not. And so the areas that Israel definitely is never going to part with, we're going to apply our law to administer them under Israeli law. That includes all of the Jewish communities. That includes the Jordan Valley. It's not all the land that we probably need, but be that as it may, the Palestinians have 4 years to figure out if they want a state. Well, they've had 100 years. They haven't wanted one. They've wanted ours. Probably not going to happen, but we have to realize that this is phase one. This is not final borders that the mapping committee is trying to figure out. This is something that we're just doing for now, and we shouldn't look at it as something permanent because it's important. And the last thing I want to say about the Trump plan is that the reason why it's so important is because for a generation, the Americans have made their Middle East policy about being bad to their allies and good to their enemies. And guess what? Then more people want to be America's enemies and fewer people want to be America's allies. Why would you want to be on the losing side? That's destabilized the region because it empowered people who thought, well, we're not going to pay a price for our aggression. So the Trump plan said, no, that's not true. The bad guys aren't going to be rewarded for their badness. The good guys are going to be rewarded for their goodness. It's very important. It's great for Israel, and it's fantastic for America.
And she went on. So, great little talk by Caroline. She's never seems to be at a loss for words. And quoting Latin, too. Wow, that's fantastic. So, legal terms, even. So, look, it's a very destabilized world, as you can probably see from just what's going on day by day. Don't panic. God is still in control. God will work it out. And, I don't know, enjoy the ride. I did an interview with someone the other day, and one of the points I made was when Jesus came the first time, there were all these prophecies about his first coming. And by and large, they missed it. They missed it. Here was the Messiah. And at the end, Jesus, he wept over Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, if you only knew. My fear is, and what I don't want to be, and what I don't want this church to be, is in a position where we miss the things that relate to his second coming. That's why we talk about it. That's why we think it's important. So let's pray. Father, thanks so much for your word. We pray that you will bless us this week. We pray that you will give us opportunities to share the gospel with those around us and to talk about the hope that we have because of our faith in Jesus Christ and the fact that he came to earth, born of a virgin, lived a perfect life, was crucified for our sins, buried, rose again, ascended to heaven, and will return someday, and we will always be with him. Bless us this week in Jesus' name. Amen.